All right, let's jump into this deep dive. We've got a really unique book to discuss today, Napoleon Hill's Outwitting the Devil.
Yeah, this one's definitely not your typical self-help read.
Not at all. The whole premise is pretty wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's framed as, well, a literal interview.
An interview Hill says he conducted with the devil himself, way back in 1938.
Exactly. And it wasn't even published for, what, decades?
That's right, which just adds another layer of intrigue to it all.
For sure. So the core idea presented in the book is Hill trying to kind of pull back the curtain on the devil's methods.
It's his playbook, yeah. How this personified negative force supposedly controls people and stops them from reaching their potential.
So our mission here is to look past that, let's say, unusual narrative frame.
Right, and really zero in on the core insights the book offers. Things about fear, control, finding purpose.
And figuring out how to overcome those things, internal and external, that hold people back. But we're sticking strictly to what's in this book.
It's definitely a provocative way to tackle some pretty timeless human struggles using this devil figure.
It really is. And the book grounds it, interestingly, in Hill's own life story. He talks quite a bit about his own difficulties.
Yeah, the hardships he faced and how he used them, almost like a testing ground for these principles of achievement he was developing.
He even brings up that poem, Invictus.
Right, master of my fate, captain of my soul. That really sets the stage, emphasizing personal agency right from the start.
And he shares this key realization he had, stemming from his own failures.
The idea that every adversity, every single setback, contains the seed of an equivalent benefit.
Not the whole flower, as he puts it, but the seed. The potential is there if you look for it.
And he mentions discovering this often in really tough times, which led him to rely on what he called his other self.
His other self. What exactly is that, according to the book?
Well, it seems to be sort of an inner wisdom, maybe intuition, a deeper consciousness that kind of steps in when your regular thinking mind is just overwhelmed.
Okay, like an internal guidepost.
Yeah, a key resource he found for navigating those really challenging periods.
Which, in the story, leads him to this interview with the devil character.
And like you said, not the cartoon version with horns and a pitchfork.
No, not at all. The devil in this book presents himself as something much more subtle.
Definitely. More like a negative energy or a negative state of mind rather than a physical being.
He claims he lives in the minds of people who are dominated by fear, occupying the negative part of the atom?
Something like that, yeah. Representing the negative forces within existence itself.
And from that position, he makes this absolutely startling claim.
Oh, yeah. That he controls 98% of people on Earth.
98%. It's hard to even wrap your head around.
It really is. And he says his main tool, his primary weapon for achieving this control, is a habit he calls drifting.
Drifting. Okay, the book really leans into this concept. How does the devil define it in this interview?
He describes it as basically letting yourself be pushed around by circumstances, by external influences.
So not really thinking for yourself.
Exactly. Doing little or no independent thinking, just sort of accepting whatever life hands you without putting up a fight or aiming for something specific.
Almost like your opinions aren't even your own, they're just supplied.
Right. Supplied by him, the devil character claims. It boils down to mental laziness, essentially.
The text is pretty blunt about it, isn't it? Laziness plus indifference equals procrastination.
Which equals drifting. Yeah, it creates this kind of vacuum, this path of least resistance that negativity can just flow into.
And he claims this isn't something that just happens later in life. He starts young.
That's his claim. He points to things like physical heredity, maybe weaknesses passed down, making minds more susceptible.
Okay.
But also, and maybe more importantly, environment and imitation. The influence of parents, teachers, relatives, even religious figures, shaping minds early on.
And he plants negative thoughts?
Yeah.
Fear, greed, vanity, anger, laziness, so subtly that people think those thoughts are their own ideas.
Yeah, it's described as a really insidious kind of manipulation, starting right from childhood.
The book gives quite a few examples of how this drifting actually looks in practice.
It does, like going through school without any real aim or purpose for being there, just, checking the boxes.
Or drifting into marriage without a clear plan for harmony, which almost guarantees conflict down the line over money or kids or whatever.
Right. Or taking the first job you find, maybe because you're afraid of being poor, not because it aligns with any kind of definite goal.
Just drifting occupationally.
And financially, too. Spending without thinking, saving very little, never building real security, just drifting along.
Even accepting negative environments like a bad job or difficult home life.
Yeah.
And just putting up with it instead of actively trying to change things.
And the devil actually explicitly calls out the media, the pulpit, newspapers, movies, radio back then, as tools.
Tools for spreading these negative, dominating ideas.
Exactly. Spreading them in ways that make people internalize them, think they came up with them themselves.
He talks about propaganda being a key trick, mixing it into the news, into education.
Slipping these negative or limiting ideas into people's minds until they accept them as their own truths. It's all about targeting minds that aren't actively thinking for themselves.
He even says he prefers working with people who make, quote, no pretense of thinking.
Yeah, those are the easiest ones to control, according to his confession.
And this habit, this drifting, this lack of definite thought, it leads people right into something else the book discusses, the law of hypnotic rhythm.
Right, hypnotic rhythm. And the text presents this not as some kind of magic, but as a natural law.
Like gravity.
Exactly, like gravity or inertia. It's just a fundamental principle of how nature works.
And what does it do? What's its function?
Its function is to make habits permanent, to fix whatever thought patterns are dominant in your mind through repetition. Nature uses it to solidify things.
So if you're drifting, letting negative thoughts or external influences dominate.
Then hypnotic rhythm kicks in and locks those patterns down. The devil explains that drifting basically makes you submit to this law.
So it makes the negative habits permanent.
It makes any dominant habit permanent. So if you're drifting, dominated by negativity or purposelessness, this law cements that state. It uses repetition to trap people in those negative cycles.
Making it harder and harder to break free.
Precisely. And the devil mentions his favorite fear for getting people stuck in this loop is the fear of death.
Why that one specifically?
Because of the uncertainty surrounding it. That lack of definite knowledge, he claims, causes more people to drift into uncertainty and fear than almost anything else, making them prime targets for hypnotic rhythm.
But, and this seems crucial, the book says this law isn't inherently evil.
Not at all. That's the key. It's a neutral law. Nature will also use hypnotic rhythm to make positive habits permanent.
So if your dominant thoughts are about, say, prosperity or health or a definite goal,
then the law works in your favor. It will fix those positive thought habits just as readily if you consciously make them dominant through focus and repetition.
okay, so that's the way out. That's Hill's counter-strategy.
Exactly. How do you break the drift? How do you escape the negative pull of hypnotic rhythm? The book lays out 7 principles.
7 principles for freedom and self-determination. Let's see, they were definiteness of purpose.
Mastery over self, learning from adversity, controlling environmental influence.
Time, harmony, and caution. Those are the 7 listed.
Right. And these are positioned as the keys to taking back control from that drifting state.
Let's dig into a couple of the big ones the book emphasizes. First, definiteness of purpose. What's the core idea there?
Well, first off, it's presented as a privilege you have to choose. It's not automatic. You have to adopt it as a policy, maintain it consciously.
It takes effort.
Definitely. And its power, according to the devil in the interview, is that it basically slams the door shut on him.
How so?
Because his influence thrives on vagueness, on indecision, on drifting. A mind that is definite, that has a clear purpose, offers no foothold for him. It's like a shield.
So even a weak plan, if pursued with definiteness,
is more likely to succeed, the book argues, than a brilliant plan pursued half-heartedly. Definiteness of purpose plus a definite plan equals success, generally speaking.
though the book does include a caveat from the devil's perspective too, right? About definiteness going wrong.
Yes, it acknowledges that if your definite purpose becomes rooted in greed or ego, and you start violating the rights of others to achieve it,
Then you run afoul of another law.
the law of compensation, he calls it. Basically, cause and effect. What goes around comes around. Harm others with your definite purpose, and negative consequences will eventually follow.
That makes sense. And it connects directly to the next big principle, mastery over self.
Which the book frames as absolutely fundamental. You can't determine your own destiny if you can't master yourself.
And it gives a starting point for achieving that mastery, focusing on 3 specific appetites.
Right. 3 areas where lack of self-discipline often trips people up. First is food.
The book is surprisingly specific about this. Improper eating, neglecting, intestinal health.
Yeah, auto-intoxication, it calls it. The idea is that poor physical health from bad eating habits literally poisons the body and clouds the mind, making clear thought and strong will much harder. It makes you more prone to drifting.
Okay, second appetite.
Sex. It's described as this incredibly powerful natural force. If it's uncontrolled, it can lead to all sorts of problems and distractions.
So the idea isn't suppression, but
Transmutation. Controlling that energy and consciously redirecting it, channeling it into your work, your purpose, your creative endeavors, making it a source of drive instead of weakness.
and the third one was loosely organized opinions. That sounds a bit odd.
It does initially, but it's not about having opinions. It's about the habit of constantly expressing unsolicited, often negative or half-baked opinions, especially about other people.
Why is that considered a lack of self-mastery?
The book argues it wastes mental energy, creates unnecessary conflict and enemies, and leaves you vulnerable. It mentions a journalist losing his job because he couldn't control this habit. It draws a line between the right to think freely and the destructive habit of careless talk.
So mastering these three areas is the foundation.
Yes, because it all comes back to the power of your own thoughts. The book stresses that the only thing you have absolute control over is your own mind, your own thoughts. Mastering yourself starts there.
Okay, so connecting these pieces, learning from adversity principle 3, that goes back to the seed of benefit idea.
Right. Failure isn't final. It's a state of mind. And sometimes, the book suggests, a major failure can actually be a gift because it forces you out of your drift, breaks the hypnotic rhythm, makes you rethink everything.
And controlling your environment, especially who you associate with principle 4, that ties into hypnotic rhythm too.
Absolutely, because that law forces you into harmony with your surroundings. So, if you deliberately choose to associate with people who have positive habits, definite purpose.
You make the law work for you instead of against you.
Exactly. You absorb those positive influences. And that connects to Harmony Principle 6 as this broader natural law where positive, respectful relationships built on purpose benefit everyone involved.
So it all kind of comes together. The devil, in the book's narrative, controls the 98% through drifting, the lack of purpose, the lack of self-mastery, the passive thinking.
Which leaves them vulnerable to hypnotic rhythms cementing those negative patterns.
But knowledge of these tricks, supposedly revealed in the interview, plus the active application of these principles, especially definiteness of purpose and self-mastery.
That's presented as the way out, the path to freedom.
The devil's big confession in the book is basically that he's powerless against someone who has conquered their fears and truly taken control of their own mind.
And the text emphasizes that the power itself, the universal forces, they're neutral. They're available to anyone.
It's not about God versus devil as external forces fighting over you.
But rather how you choose to use the power of your own thought, constructively or destructively. Your freedom lies in choosing your dominant thoughts. That's the core message.
Which leads to Hill's final realization in the book, looking back on his own struggles. It's quite poignant.
Yeah, he sees he was often carrying the matches that started his own fires through fear, misunderstanding, or just drifting.
But at the same time,
He always had the water, too. The power within his own mind, the ability to set a definite purpose, to learn from the setbacks. It was always there, within his control.
that distinction, that we often cause our own problems through passivity, but also hold the solution through active, principled thought, that really feels like the heart of outwitting the devil.
It definitely reframes the whole struggle, makes it internal, a battle won or lost within your own mind based on your habits of thought.
So for you listening, maybe reflect on that final point from Hill. Where in your own life might you be, perhaps unintentionally, drifting, lacking that clear, definite purpose in some area, struggling with one of those aspects of self-mastery?
The book's argument is that the power to change that, the water to put out those fires, isn't somewhere else. It's already within you.
Waiting to be consciously directed. So perhaps ask yourself, what definite purpose could you start focusing on today, using some of these principles?
It really shifts the focus from blaming things outside yourself to recognizing your own power and responsibility. A challenging but potentially liberating idea.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a fascinating look into Napoleon Hill's Outwitting the Devil. Thanks for unpacking it with me.
Always interesting to explore these foundational texts. Lots to think about.
Definitely. Don't forget to subscribe to the Next Thought podcast.